guys, it's Andrea. I feel like it's been a hot second since I made a video. It feels like forever, and that's partially because my premiere is gone and partially because I've been super busy like trying to study for the GRE, which is harder than expected because I haven't done math like in 10 years, and like trying to get a cool job, and I keep getting rejected. So yeah, there's that. But I haven't done my July wrap up, so I thought I'd talk about the books I read in July. I didn't read as many as last month, I think. They're mostly just my books I had for the booktubeathon. So I'm just going to talk a little bit more in detail about those books, and we'll see what happens. The first book I read at the start of the month, so it wasn't for booktubeathon, and that was Space Opera by Catherine and Valente. I really enjoyed Catherine's style writing and refrigerator monologue, so I was really looking forward to this book. But unfortunately, it just I felt like it was missing something for me, and I wasn't entirely a fan of the style this book was written in. So this book is basically, how do I describe this book? It's about this guy who was like this faded, washed up rocker dude who is kind of this mixture of like David Bowie and like Keith Richards and like a little bit of awkward. His bandmate are chosen by like this alien committee to participate on behalf of Earth for this like karaoke Hunger Games in space, where a bunch of species come together and they have to participate and sing songs, and like the loser's planet gets annihilated. So like the fate of Earth is in this guy's hands, and he gets transported to like this magical planet and like is interacts with a bunch of different species, and he's like this player, so he like has a bunch of sex with like different species, and that gets weird. Anyways, I love the sci-fi aspects of the books. I love learning about the worlds that they were transported to, about the different species and how they were described. Like visually, I thought was stunning. What I didn't like about this book was the humor. It's like a lot of like LOL, random, or XD humor, which like I'm not a fan of. I never was a fan. Even when I was a kid, I just did not like that. And just, for me, it felt a little like, how to describe this? Fake. I just personally did not enjoy that, and I felt like it dulled down the narrative for me, at least. For example, there's this alien who randomly takes the form of a paperclip, and his name is Clippy, so he's supposed to look like Clippy, the paperclip from the Microsoft Office program back in like the 90s and early 2000s. So I was like, okay. And then later on, there's like this time traveling zombie red panda who like talks and stuff, which I thought was kind of weird. And then like there's a lot of little side things that happen, and I don't want to get into the plot too much, that just had me like raising my eyebrow a little bit at the narrative. So I just didn't like that. What I didn't like is that I wanted the narrative, or I was expecting, should I say, I just didn't get the book I was expecting to get. I thought the narrative was going to go like really deep into the entire like process of like competing in a karaoke competition. Like we'd get like day by day, and this is such a short novella that it just like kind of skims or flies by through that. So I wasn't expecting that, so it kind of caught me off guard. So it definitely did like dampen like the experience of reading this book, at least for me. Yeah, that's what I think about it. I gave it like a 3.5 stars on Goodreads because I did really enjoy the parts of the book. I enjoyed. I really loved like the sci-fi. I really loved learning about that and the different kind of aliens. I thought was like parts of the book where it shined the most. But you know, like there's like, I feel like there's like a lot of plot holes. And there's like this cat, like talking cat, and like I felt like that cat had a narrative that was like that had begun like about a third of the way into the book and never was really resolved. So that really bothered me for some reason. So just like those kind of little things, I would have appreciated if they were expanded on more. And I understand that might be because it was such in a small format. But yeah, 3.5 stars. The next pile of books I want to talk about are all my booktubeathon books, which I kind of talked about in my last video, but I guess I'll go a little bit in detail. I'm going to start with books that I did not finish because
your girl's in a slump, a reading slump.
And it's not these books' fault because I do think they're interesting. It's just that they were at the end of my TBR pile, so I think that really affected like me reading them. And that is City of Brass. I cannot finish this book ever. I'm gonna read it though because it's literally already overdue, and I think it's like 2 days overdue, and the library is closed tomorrow, so I'm gonna read this today. The next book I didn't finish was A Darker Shade of Magic. I'm only about like, I'm on page 40 on this book, so I don't think that's enough to actually like talk about. Check out my bookmark. Kylo Ren. I do like the world that's starting to like unravel in it. There is that I know everybody says that there's like this Harry Potter like feel to it. I definitely already feel it in this book. So I'm gonna try to finish these today. I'm gonna try to force myself out of my reading slump because these are seriously overdue, and I don't want to pay a lot of money. The next books I read was American Street. This is the first book I read for Booktubeathon. I talked about it a little bit in my other video, but one thing that I appreciated about this book is that it talks about, I mean, the difference between the like, immigrant experience, like the African immigrant experience as compared to like the African American experience, and how they're not, you know, they're not the same, and they never will be. And for some reason, in a lot of people's minds or in the mainstream, those two experiences are kind of combined together, and this happens with other ethnicities as well. I feel like the first gen immigrant experience is never going to be the immigrant experience, and vice versa. And so I really think that there should be that distinction, and I really appreciate that this book did that. I mentioned it in my last video, but if you're a fan of The Hate You Give, you will definitely like this book. It has the same writing style. There's a lot of slang in it, like modern slang. So read this book. It has a lot of magical realism. In this book, the main character, Fabiola, she practices voodoo, and she really believes in Papa Legba, and there's a lot of like Papa Legba like references throughout the book, and it really, like, I feel like enhances the narrative that she's going through within. There's the overarching narrative that's happening throughout the book, but the internal one, the internal arc, I feel that Papa Legba really helps enhance in this book. So I think this is a really good book by Evie's a Boy. The next book I'm going to talk about was my favorite book I read in the month of July, and that is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This book is literally one of my favorite books I've read this year. I think it's right below Circe maybe, but I really did enjoy Thunderhead. It's up there, it's up on that list, but this book, I needed to become a mini-series like yesterday. This is about Evelyn Hugo, who is like this beautiful it Hollywood actress back in the classic Hollywood studio system. If y'all know anything about the classic Hollywood system, is that it literally sucked the souls of everybody in it, you know? So I really love how this delved into it. I'm a really big fan of learning about those stories. I think they're so interesting. I spent hours on those Wikipedia pages of like Cary Grant and stuff. It's just interesting to me. So definitely check this book out. It's about Evelyn Hugo telling her story at the end of her life, so it goes back, and there's this really interesting plot twist I was not expecting that came at the very end of this book. It's just so enthralling, and it's just amazing, and it is just really good. The next book, or the final book I read, was The Final Six by Alexandra Munir, who is an Iranian American author. I talked about this in my last video, I feel like I keep saying that, but things I liked about this book, I liked how the main character was also Iranian American. I liked how she stood her ground. Would I change some things in this book? Sure I would. It's a YA book. It's very typically YA, I think. This takes place like in a world where tsunamis and global warming have overtaken the landscape and have just posed a giant threat to Earth, and it's becoming uninhabitable. So for some reason, NASA is sending 6 teenagers to Europa, which is one of Jupiter's moons, to colonize, and they get a bunch of kids and put them in a bunker in the NASA headquarters in Texas, and then they just make them compete against each other. So there's like a space Hunger Games aspect to it. Things start to go wrong when they inject them with this serum that's supposed to combat radioactive sickness, But it turns out that this thing that they injected them with is actually life forms from Europa itself. So it starts to mutate these kids into like aggressive people at times, but mostly it manifests itself in the way in like through superpowers. So they just become like mutants at the end. What I didn't like about this book was probably the love story. I'm not that big of a fan of love stories anyways, but I didn't like how the main character saw her love interest and like there's that insta love, and it wasn't really, you know, expanded on. Like I'm normally okay with insta love. I just, when it's not deepened or it's not explained as the book progresses is when I kind of like have a problem, because there was no real motivation for the main character to actually like the guy she liked. So I was like, eh. It's very multicultural. It has a cast of people from all over the globe, so I thought that was cool. I think it kind of brushes on toxic masculinity. There's another American participant who is the nephew of the president of the US, and he's like super white and he thinks he's good at everything, and he's like very smug and like annoying. They pit him against the love interest like side by side, and you do see the differences, but I think it wasn't expanded enough on. It's a fun read. It's a really fun YA. Will I read the next book? Probably. Will I seek it out on my own? I probably wouldn't actually like personally go to the store and buy this book, but yeah, I feel like that sounds horrible, but I liked it. I would check it out. Yeah, that sounds like I'm a bitch. Okay, so those are the books I read in the month of July. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope I didn't mumble too much, and I'll see you next time with some exciting news. What? Question mark? Okay, anyways, bye.